instead of speaking extemporaneously like I usually do. It's the only thing I have in common with the president. If I go off script, there's no telling what might happen. However, in advance of what I've written, do you realize what's happened here? We thought we had too many chairs, and we had to go find more. That's one signal of what's happened here. Another is who is here. You're all, I'm hoping, aware that Shannon's first husband is here, and is as much a part of this family as everybody else. And I'm honored that he's here. And you've heard talk about her work with this incredible family and helping to raise little Max and Ava. Not only is today Ava's birthday, but she's wearing a dress that Shannon made for her. So be sure you give her a hug today before you leave. So what else can be said about a person who left us more than 30 years too soon? I have been receiving a mountain of messages from you and other family, friends, and professional colleagues around the country this week, and they all say the same thing. There are no words. I agree. Mere words about Shannon, especially from her husband, could not possibly capture her essence, her energy, her contagious laugh that you've been hearing about. So instead, I'm going to talk about myself. How many of you knew me 23 years ago? If you did, you probably noticed that I am not the same person today. She changed me deeply, profoundly. She changed me in that part of my soul that I thought I was the only one knew that was there. From the sublime to the mundane, she searched for, she found, dusted off and polished every part of my being so that I could reach my potential. I have started making my bed. Even when she wasn't there, including this week. I started thinking of ideas for Christmas presents in September and actually buying them, or as she preferred, making them. Before Christmas Eve, I bought presents. And I started showing up on time for parties and appointments and weddings. She's changed me. More importantly, she did other things. She got me away from TV addiction and showed me the world. We honeymooned both in Cancun and on a sailing ship in the Caribbean. Cross your fingers, I'm going off script. It was a Windjammer cruise called the Fantôme. 15 months later, it was sunk by Hurricane Mitch in the Caribbean. Just 2 weeks ago, I found that somebody had written a book about the ship and its sinking, and so I bought it. When I realized I wouldn't be able to give it to her at Christmas, I started reading it to her at her hospital bed. We hiked a Honduran jungle together and bought clothes and souvenirs in the Hindu neighborhood of Belize City. We walked from the Eiffel Tower to the Louvre. We rode trains from Normandy to Alsace-Lorraine to the Mediterranean. We barbecued fish for our Thanksgiving dinner in Costa Rica. We walked through a rainforest there and rode a zip line high above the treetops. My daughter and granddaughter were afraid, but she wasn't. Shannon rode right down. I would never have planned such a trip, much less carried it off without her eye for detail and endless energy for planning. But it doesn't end there. We drove through Ireland and slept in a castle. And because this is how she was, she allowed me to set aside several days of that trip searching for evidence of my ancestors. She didn't just tolerate it either. She got into it, and she thoroughly enjoyed the detective work. We climbed Diamond Head and walked the Waikiki Beach together on my birthday. She came with me on numerous business trips, and we explored Boston and New Orleans and Minneapolis together. Various trips to the home where I grew up, where my mother still lives in California. She scrubbed my mother's floor, clipped her toenails. And during this last trip, when my mother is failing at 92, she even cleaned her up out of after a toileting incident. She came out to me after that and said, "We're even." So how did this happen? How did I get so lucky? It was not luck, my friends. It was orchestrated. In February 1995, at the Soup Kitchen, where I had been working at that point for 10 years, once a month, my friends Skip and Kathy Mundy arrived, as usual, for their monthly volunteer duty. And Kathy said to me, "Hey, Tim, have you met my sister?" I naively assumed she had been saying that to everyone, as this was the first time she brought Shannon along to volunteer and was introducing her around. She hadn't been saying that to everyone. Actually, she's just said it to me. Years, literally years later, we got Kathy to admit. She looked at her divorced sister, looked at her church's former director of education, also divorced, and said, Only took me a couple of months to realize Kathy was right. Shannon needed a little more time to realize it, however. I presented her with a ring the following Christmas, and her throat went dry, her stomach tied into a knot, and she said, "What do you say when somebody asks you to marry them? You say yes or no?" She said, "You crazy guy." I pointed out to her that that was not an answer, so she repeated it. "You crazy guy." Finally, she said, "Okay, but not yet." 18 months later, most of you here gathered at a church for our wedding and in this building for our reception. The adventure began right away, from the Caribbean to Cancun, from Du Bois to Seattle, Hawaii, France, Ireland. She joined me on business trips to Boston, New Orleans, Chicago, Orlando, San Francisco, Minneapolis, and then 2 months ago to Alaska, which you probably will have to read about on my Facebook page, because I don't think I'm going to be able to keep it together and talk about it here. Most of you know, she planned it for our 20th anniversary, and she did not tell me where we were going. She said, "Get the week off work." I literally printed the boarding pass at the airport and read it, and then knew where she had planned this trip. She did fun things like that, She didn't just do normal things. But the best years that we had were after she retired from teaching, not only because she was able to do something besides lesson planning every night from dinner until bedtime. Teachers, you know what I'm talking about. But because it moved her into the most remarkable period of her life. Oh, yeah, she was a world-class teacher, like you've heard, but not just because she could take these kids whose first language was not English and bring them up to a reading and math level appropriate to their age and grade. One after another of her kids advanced 2 or 3 years in testing in the course of a single school year. You probably knew that, but did you know that she took under her wing a young brother and sister whose mother had died? She took them to movies and to ice cream shops and brought them to our house to play with the dogs, learn to bake cookies. She didn't have to do that. It's not part of teaching. But Shannon, she had to do that. That wall that you heard about her building, there were 3 summers where our house was overflowing with library books. She didn't know how to build a wall, but she figured it out. Debbie told you about launching families. And this is an important story, so forgive me for going on so long, but this is how it happened. We saw a 60 Minutes piece one time about foster children who turned 18 and were sent out into the world utterly unprepared, but without further adult assistance. You probably saw the same 60 Minutes story and you thought, gee, that's too bad. But after she dried her tears, she started to read up on the problem. She started to talk to people all over the country about that. She called the Air Force Academy and got information about their program where they connect cadets with local families for mentoring. She talked to the County Department of Children and Family Services, and she talked with her fellow members of the Zonta Club, and out of that, she single-handedly designed and brought to life Launching Families, a program that trains women to be mentors for 18-year-old girls who age out of the foster system, helping them to cope with college or work or relationships or pregnancies or whatever it might be. Today that program is thriving in El Paso County. And I hope some of you here will help to make sure it continues to do so. She didn't just design the program, she became a mentor herself. Kayla Mills was unable to be here today, as far as I know. But Shannon taught her how to create and stick to a budget, how to drive, how vegetables are better than fast food. She got her into a professional school where she got a certificate in medical office management, and now she's working full-time for a doctor and supporting herself. She talked me into letting Kayla live with us for 1.5 years, and that was just fine because I was inspired by her enthusiasm. There are dozens of Kaylas all over this county, thanks to Shannon Rowan. Lastly, as a husband and father, I will never be able to express fully my gratitude to her for the way she treated my 4 children and their children. You'd never have known there was no blood relationship between her and Cassidy and Dylan and Evan. So what do we do now? In a few minutes, Tom's going to be asking you to think about how Shannon touched your life, just like he did before. And I want to weigh in on that. The changes that she brought, the improvements that she brought about in me will remain a part of me. By becoming the man that she thought that I was, by bringing out the best part of me, the part that she called forth, I will keep her alive. And I invite you to do the same.